It's no secret that Hollywood and the music industry are coming under fire for its corruption and abuse culture. Sean Diddy Combs is just the most recent and well-known example of this, but there are many untold stories.
Join us today as we sit down with Jeannie Ortega, a powerful Christian voice in the music industry. Once rising to stardom as a secular artist, Jeannie's story is one of transformation that will inspire you. Raised in the world of Santeria, she faced the pressures and spiritual challenges of the music industry head-on.
Don't forget to follow and subscribe to Invested with Purpose to stay updated with our latest episodes. Hit that notification bell and be sure to comment and let us know what you think of Invested with Purpose or what our guests are sharing with you.
Jeannie Ortega, Pep Post. Let me show you how it's supposed to be done.
Don't get me started. It's getting kind of crowded in here. Back up off me. I'm feeling like I'm suffocating. Now here's my problem. I'm not gonna be your chick on the side. Forget about it. You know damn well it wouldn't be right. I don't know what you've been thinking about me. Did you think this?
Pray that you cover me when I'm up there, cover my voice.
I'm letting go. Lord, take control. 'Cause I'm done with all this pain from long ago. Take hold of me. Take everything. What I buried, what I hide, and try to keep. Take all of me.
Welcome to Invested with Purpose, making the most out of our time, talent, and treasure. I'm Kara,
And I'm Brian.
and today we have an exceptional guest, Jeannie Ortega. And Jeannie, it is so great to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited. I love your slogan. That's my life. That's it right there. That's what I do. So it's beautiful.
Well, I just kind of want to dive right in. And we don't usually do this. We don't usually go straight for the book.
I know,
But
right?
I'm going to go straight for the book. What is happening to me? I started reading it,
Oh.
and it really speaks to so many of us women that have unique giftings or something that God has set us apart for, and the struggles and that spirit of jealousy that we women come up against. Walk us through some of that in your earlier years, and your eyes being so different than some of the girls that you were growing up around, and you're growing up in New York and the struggles, those unique struggles too. But if you can kind of just tell us early life with, that Jeannie experienced, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and in a predominantly Latin neighborhood. In my community, it was very rare for there to be, someone with color eyes. And then even as an early, since I was a little girl, I had like these huge aspirations that I don't think any of the other girls in my neighborhood wanted. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to make a difference in the world. It was, I grew up in the ghetto of Brooklyn, and everyone was just trying to survive and, do what they always saw. I needed to be people like me that was able to say, hey, there's more to life, and there's things that you can do, and you can use your gifts and your talents to make a difference in the world. And that created jealousy as a young girl, and that was really hard for me. And so if there are women out there that struggle, we all do. We get confronted with these things that are evil. Envy is evil. Jealousy is evil. There's place and room for all of us, to make a difference in this world, to, shine in this world uniquely. But I think what happens is we get distracted and we focus on others and then, kind of tear them down. And for me, the enemy used that very early on. I didn't even want to be here anymore. I was so bombarded with the troubles at home to the troubles out of the home. When I go outside, there's not a safe place. Inside, there wasn't a safe place because of alcohol addiction and things like that. And, and I'm just grateful for music because I didn't know it was the Lord, but the Lord used it to kind of shift my motivation from allowing those things to crush my spirit and break me to actually give me motivation to do something and really go out there and pursue greater. So
Yes, and I did see that you were raised in Santeria, but also there was a lot of Catholicism in growing up as well. So how did that shape you in your younger years and then leading into your music career?
yeah, well, growing up with all of the negativity that I just mentioned, and then my spiritual outlet was witchcraft. It's bizarre when we hear it. That's like, what? That's nuts. But when it's what you grow up in, when it's tradition, when it's family practices and tradition, it's all you know. And for me, growing up in a Latin background, Santeria, which is a form of the occult, is very prevalent in Latin homes, particularly Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, and what it does is it's worship of the dead. And it's really dark. And a lot of it is centered around curses and cursing others and kind of what you were just talking about with me about, the envy and the jealousy. So it's like
a life of fear.
I had that.
So this person's against me, so let me curse them. And
vengeance. Yes. And all of that. So that's what I understood of a spiritual outlet. Yes, it was weaved into Catholicism. And that for me was difficult because when there's, the occult and then there's some form of, Christ and some outlet, it was all corrupt. There was really no safety for me. And it wasn't until years later that I was so grateful someone invited me to a church and I really experienced the Lord, in his presence and his peace and his hope and his... Not only is there, a lack of peace in people's homes and outside of their home, but they go on social media everywhere they turn. And that's kind of how I felt. And luckily, social media wasn't really a factor when I was growing up because who knows if I would be here.
We're all thankful that social media was not a part of our childhood. I think that I can't even imagine the pressures. I have a son, he's 14, and it's different with boys, but with girls, the pressure that comes with social media and the look that you have to have and the appearances that you have to keep up and the pressures that are just there that are not there for guys as much at all. And I mean, even, you can go back, to the time of, the MTV days and you had Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears and you have these certain looks, that everyone has to have. And then when somebody goes crazy, everyone's wondering what's going on.
What happened?
Yeah. All of a sudden Britney's like breaking windows in a car and shaved her head. And, the mental health aspect of it all is totally a second thought. Yeah. Nobody was thinking of that.
Exactly.
So 2005,
not at all.
2006 is when you really sprang into the forefront and you'd had some really strong hits, Crowded, that was one of my favorites. So I'm trying to look at your timeline here. Where were you on the spectrum of faith at that point, and what kind of obstacles were you overcoming in the industry? Because we know how corrupt it is. We know about the abuse culture. What was your experience as a young girl? I mean, you were absolutely beautiful as you are now, but like Brian's talking about, there was a look.
There was a look, yeah.
What are some struggles you had? You'd even gone on tour with Rihanna.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was told, so from all of that, I ran away into the music industry, if you will, and by God's grace, because it was God who allowed it, and I knew I needed it at the time. It really saved my life. I got discovered. I got signed to a major record label, but that was from, that was my adolescence. That's from the age of, the tender age of 11 to, my entire teenage year till I became a young adult, teenage years till that. And, I was told, I needed to lose weight and, those kind of things. And I'm a little girl, and it's like, hey, you need to lose weight and you need to do this and you need to look like this. And, to bring up Christina and Britney, those were the samples. And that's exactly
Yeah.
what they were pitting me against. They're like, you need to look like this. And, I was signed as the bad girl on the label. I was from Brooklyn, in your face. My music was edgy. They wanted that. They wanted the bad girl. And remember, I said, my aspirations were to change the world for good. But, and that's really what music did for me. It brought me out of my depression, my slumber, like all of that it awakened something in me, an ambition in me that really helped me live in a time where I was really depressed as a little girl. And so I wanted to do that for others. I wanted to help them with music. I wanted to help other little girls with music the way music helped me feel better. But when you get in the industry, what happens is you get people that handle you, and they're constantly telling you what you need to do, what the marks that you need to meet. And so what eventually happened with me, even though I'm in your face, and even though I'm, very like, I know what I want, what I stand for, all of that. And I did at that time as well. I became a product. I was no longer that person that wanted to help people, even though deep inside that was what motivated me. I became a product because you have to give the people what they need. And I say this a lot, but I was a teenager, and what I was told was the guys have to want to be with you and the girls want to have to be you. That's your motivation. Go make that happen. And I'm saying it in a very PG way, because it was not the way it was said to me. So that's the driving force and the voice leading all of this fame and success. What does that do? It messes with you. And so, yeah, it was difficult. The what we see now in media of all these elites, falling because of their, sinful ways. And, that was normal. That was absolutely normal.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if you realize, but when all of this started happening, and the whole Me Too and all of those things started happening, for industry women, yeah, that's normal. And it's not normal. It's the same thing with me. I grew up in witchcraft, and I was like, well, that's just what it was. That's like our family thing. Those things are not normal.
The dysfunction seemed familiar to you.
And so you get so accustomed to that you just think it's the way it is, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so, yeah, that was my entire teenage life. And then in the midst of that, someone invited me to church. And then that is what really started turning the tide for me.
Wonderful.
That's amazing. Someone reached out to you and just invited you to church. And just from your story so far, it's like, it's the example of how God works, where he's constantly drawing someone into a direction that he wants them to be, and he will use your circumstance, no matter where you are, to get you there. And then someone just invites you to church. I mean, like, they must have been listening to God. God says,
they were.
Jeannie, you need to invite her to church.
Exactly.
And they were, because I was at a point in my life, even though I was getting all this success and, my dreams were coming true, where I realized, even though all of my bank account was changing, my popularity was changing, my access was changing, my fame was changing, my heart was still the same. I was still angry. I was still broken. I still didn't understand why things in the house didn't change. None of that had changed. Like, the actual things that were my core were the same. And at that point I was like Brittany, you know what I mean? Like, I had reached the goals. Obviously I wasn't, not to that caliber, but I had reached all the goals I had for myself, and I still felt that way. What else is there? Right.
And all the wealth and all the possessions and all the fame, and none of it can feed that craving within us that only Jesus can fill.
It's also interesting just to hear you talking about this. I mean, from an outsider point of view, we only see the success. We only see the finished product, and we see the great music video and the big tours, and they're making money, and then you wake up one day and you're like, oh, what happened to so and so? Like, they used to be so popular, and then, like, and then you Google them and you're like, oh my goodness. We don't see the internal struggle at all. We see the results of it. No, it's not all glitz and glamour and fame and everything. There's a lot of darkness.
Yeah, and the truth is you know, you don't have to seek fame. Like every person, especially in this country, the way we're trained is to climb the ladder, to, you know, to attain the highest success. That doesn't fulfill. It doesn't satisfy. And so what happens is a lot of these musicians, as talented as they are, as famous as they get, if they don't find the Lord, if they don't, you know, surrender to God, then there is nothing. It's constantly grasping for something that feels unattainable, and then it makes your self-worth, you know, feel horrible because you're just like, I can't, you know, nothing is fulfilling, nothing is satisfying. What's going on? Why doesn't money do it? Why doesn't fame do it? Why doesn't success do it? Why doesn't, and let's say good things, right? Marriage and children and all these, those things are good things, and success is not a bad thing either, but none of it will fulfill us. And that's the thing. We are built to be fulfilled by our Creator, and that is it. But if we don't have that understanding, if we don't get to that place of surrender, then there is nothing. And that is utter darkness. And that is, you know, something that people find themselves just feeling like, what's the point of it all? And that's where I was until Jesus got a hold of me. And I'm so grateful.
Could you give us a little background now that we've kind of gotten here, as far as like you got invited to church and just kind of your conversion story, basically? Yeah. It's
a great one because up until that point, you know, my understanding of any type of religious thing was either witchcraft, which was way out there and it felt dark and it always felt wrong, and Catholicism. But it was we were not devoted Catholics. We were just, what do they call them? The ones that go for the special holidays.
Yeah, we call them CEOs, Christmas and Easter only.
Creasters is what we call them, creasters.
Creasters. So that was it. Even that experience for me wasn't a positive one. It was just a religious one. It wasn't really a relational one. And I go with her, and it's a Christian church, and it was very charismatic. And I look around and everyone is talking to God out loud. And I was like, these people are nuts. I had never experienced that. I thought they were crazy, but I was jealous.
Oh, the freedom.
I wanted that.
Yes.
These people didn't care that I was sitting next to them. There were, you know, I remember vividly, there was a woman standing up and she was crying, and I was sitting there like, you know, just like really uncomfortable. I'd never been in an experience like that. But I looked at her and I just saw freedom, to your point. I saw relationship with her maker that helped her feel safe enough to cry. And I wanted that. There in that moment, I had never experienced anything like that before. I knew what evil was. I knew what, you know, demonic spirits felt like. I knew what religious things felt like. But in that moment, I was overwhelmed by the love of God, and I began to weep. And I wept for like 4 hours straight. The service was about over when that happened. I got on my knees because I could not. It was almost like I was having a spiritual surgery. My heart was on fire because of the love of the Lord that had embraced me. Now I know what it was. At the moment, I didn't know what it was, but I knew I was safe and I knew it was good. And so I allowed for whatever, you know, God was going to do. And I wept for 4 hours straight. I was in the car. They took me back home and I was still like, and I just knew that God wanted me to go home, share what I experienced with my mother and my brother, and that would change our lives. And it did. And that was the beginning for me of a real walk with God, because there was a Sunday school that would come and get the kids in the ghetto, you know, and take us to church. And we loved it. I didn't even know it was church. So God had always been in my story. But it wasn't until that moment that I encountered him. And that was a game changer.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. So from a secular artist to a Christian artist, that transition must be incredibly difficult. Completely different fan base, completely different recording industry or, companies. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the struggles that you had, or maybe the blessing, or maybe maybe there weren't struggles. Maybe, it was everything that you wanted to be. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey because you don't ever hear that. You hear people start off in church and then they go into the world, But for me, I now, for 5 of those years after that experience, for 5 years, because no one discipled me, they were like, the church that I went to, they were like, she's a, worldly girl. She comes to our church. She gives good tithes. And we'll preach at her, we'll disciple her from the pulpit, but no one took me under their arms because it's a big shame. Because I guess I was, I was an artist, and I was edgy, and I was all these things. I wasn't saved, I had an encounter, but I wasn't saved. It took me 5 years to surrender fully because I had no discipleship. But for 5 of those years, I was still building my fame and my popularity, and I continued to get more popular and more famous, and then the tours came and all of that. So what was happening in that is the more I went to church and I learned about this Jesus, the more I wanted to talk about it. And so, how the Bible says that at the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So that's what was happening. I was becoming overcome by this God, the lover of my soul, and I wanted everyone to know about it. And even though I was still rough around the edges and I was still doing inappropriate things, really, I didn't know any better, really. I didn't no idea what sanctification was, and I was learning it little by little through, by being preached at. But that was it. I started to gain a reputation in the industry where they were like, hey, did you hear that Jeannie is a Jesus freak now? Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know what any of that was. I didn't know what those terms were. I didn't know who DC Talk was or any of that, DC Talk. And then I would literally go to the studio and I would sit down with the biggest names in pop music, and I was telling them, did you know you can feel God? Did you know that you can have, seriously, I wanted everyone to know that God isn't just a religious thing, and he's not just up there. You can feel him. He wants to have a relationship with us. And so after doing that for about almost 2 years, the label was like, we didn't sign a Christian artist. Mm-hmm. They wanted the bad girl. Remember? Girl. Yeah. So I was dropped from my label. And I thought, at this point I was at the height of my career, so I could have easily just hopped over to another label. I had already the built-in fan base, all the popularity, the accolades. I had a gold record on radio, all these things. And for the first time in my life, I looked up and I said, God, do you have a purpose for my life? Because up until then, that was my goals. Mm-hmm. That I was building the empire. I was doing all that. Oh, yeah. I had never asked God, and nor did I think I needed to. I didn't know that he had a plan for me. But as I fell in love with him, and as I learned of him and studied the scriptures myself, I realized he's very involved, and he'd always been there. So I asked him what was his plan, and that began my journey of real surrender, because I knew that I needed to lay it down, and I did. I walked away from it all, and I said, I am going to take a few years to learn my God and to learn what his plan for my life is. I went through a 3-year sanctification process, and that's the Holy Spirit, discipling me pretty much, and going to the church. And I had, some support, that in that way, but no real discipleship from a human. But it was okay because, I don't know, I think till this day, we modeled, my husband and I are pastors, and I know we'll probably get there, but we modeled our entire ministry based off of discipleship because I know how important it is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you are highlighting something that is so important, and it's lacking in the Christian church today. And this is why we have a generation that's falling away, because they need to be discipled, and they don't need to be preached at. In fact, they reject it. These younger generations, they can tell when you're being phony with them, and they want authenticity. They want an authentic God with authentic believers. And so what you're doing is so very important.
Time with God.
And that time in the Word, because
my
you can
identity.
be surrounded with as many Christians as possible, but if you're not doing that solitary time in the Word with the Lord, then there can't be growth for the Spirit.
Yeah, because pastors are great, leaders, spiritual leaders are great, but they can't inform your identity. They can't actually give your identity the purpose that it is. Only God can. Sure, we, spiritual leaders can speak that into you, but it has to be the Lord and it has to be you. And that's what it was for me. The emptiness that we talked about before, and the need for more and more and more, I no longer had. I was completely fulfilled. I didn't care if my bank account was a lot less. I didn't care if my entourage was gone. I didn't care that I lost my deal or my fame, because I now had God. And there is nothing that compared.
Well, tell us a little bit about your church, because I do want to touch on your album that you have coming out in November. But being that you're right here in Orlando, we do have a lot of Orlando listeners and viewers. So tell us about your church and where people can find you.
Yeah.
It's called Most High King Ministries, Most High King. And right now we meet in Winter Park. We rent a beautiful church there. And but our whole motto is unique in the sense that it is built on discipleship. So we really focus on one-to-one discipleship. We have, we offer courses and things like that for our members where we can go through practical things. Our next course is going to be spiritual disciplines. So many people are flailing because they don't have spiritual disciplines and so they don't know better. We do spiritual warfare courses to teach people how to open their spiritual eyes and realize when it's the Lord, when it's not the Lord. The Lord gives us all the tools that we need in Scripture to combat the enemy, to resist the enemy. Really want to be a spiritual support for people to help them fulfill the purpose of God in their own lives.
And then, the album. Yeah, we also mentioned an album forthcoming. I imagine, I'm sure everything's on streaming now.
Did you say November 14th? Is that when it
15th.
15th.
Yeah, 15th.
November 15th.
Yes. So it's the first time in almost 10 years since I've released music. My first album was almost 20 years ago, which is crazy.
We're
and that
all
was
so
my,
old.
I know, that's how I feel. I'm like, geez. No, really, I get
it.
It
Feels like it was 5 years, 10 years ago.
Right.
I mean, I'm
and
pretty
it's
sure I was
almost
singing
20.
Crowded in karaoke with Brian when we were in our 20s.
Oh, gosh.
I love it. So and I got to say about this record, I feel for the first time since my very first album, this is fully me, where I am in this phase of my life and what I wanted to say. It's called Letting Go, because as you mature in God, you will see you got to let it go. You cannot hold on to anything too tightly. I'm a minister. I'm a foster mom. And I'm a wife. In all of those areas, I have to let go. I can't control this. I can't control that. I have to trust the Lord.
Especially as a foster mom. My heart goes out to you because we fostered for a while and we ended up adopting through the system. But to foster is truly to lean into Jesus, because you're caring for children, you're loving on them, you're showing them Jesus, and then you're letting them go.
Yes.
So what a beautiful gift that you're giving to these kids and to these families. Thank you for doing that.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
And so, one last time, where can people find information about your church and ministry? Of course, albums.
Book.
I mean, everyone knows Spotify and everything else. But where in the book? Yeah, everything. Where can they find all this?
Everything is on the website, jeannieo.com, JeannieO.com. And I have everything, the music there, the book there, the ministry. You can find all links to it all. And I try to be available for God to do what he wants whenever. And so I use all my gifts for that. We've laid down our life for that. So.
Well, you are truly invested with purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. This was beautiful.
Invested with Purpose is brought to you by Timothy Partners Limited, advisor to the Timothy Plan Funds. Timothy Plan is a family of biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs. For more information, please visit Timothy Plan's website at www.timothyplan.com. Some of our podcast guests may have a relationship with Timothy Partners Limited on behalf of Timothy Plan, including affiliations, partnerships, or sponsorships. However, guests are not compensated for their appearances, and their opinions do not constitute paid testimonials. Please be aware that investments carry risks and individual experiences may vary. Consult with a financial advisor for personalized advice. And remember to find us on all of the major social media platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn.